Beauty products industry in Nigeria has grown rapidly over the last decade, with indigenous players stepping up to the plate to grab some market share from the dominant international brands. Well, earlier today, I spoke to Tara Fela-Durotoye on the growth of the industry and challenges impeding its expansion. Let's take a look.
I think that House of Tara was significant in that growth. And why? Because first of all, we set up the first makeup school to begin to train people who were interested in becoming entrepreneurs as a makeup artist, especially in the beauty industry. And I think because of my role as a pioneer in the bridal industry, young ladies will stop me and say, "You're doing my sister's makeup for her wedding, but I'd like to learn from you. I'd like you to teach me." And I started a very unstructured, because I didn't even know how to, training model of apprenticeship and training, and they weren't paying at the time. And then after that, we decided to build a structure to it. And today we have 12 centers across the country where makeup artists are being trained to start up their own businesses, not just with the skill, but also the business behind beauty, and preparing them really for the growth that is now coming into the industry. At the time, we were just training them to be their own entrepreneurs. But I'm glad to see the entrance of a lot of international brands today that also is breeding a market and need for my students to become also gainfully employed as well in the industry.
All right, well, talking about the entrance of international brands, now we've seen the middle class growing in Africa and in Nigeria in particular. Well, let's talk about the demand, most of your consumers now, because I know you have, your product as well in the market. What's their taste like? Are they more inclined to the international brands, or do you think there's a possibility of the local brands growing just like, how you started yours?
I think that for every industry, there will always be a place for indigenous brands. What the international brands are coming to enjoy today is the interest that we grew as a result of our work in the industry before their entrance. But I think that as much as people love international brands, I think that there will always be a place for the local and indigenous brands. Why? Because there's certain qualities that the indigenous brands have that international brands can't satisfy in the needs of the customers. A lot of our consumers are not just buying because it's a brand that is known internationally, but some of them are buying because it's ours. There's a proudly Nigerian drive, a movement that is going on. That's one. Two, some people are buying because they know the founder of the brand. And some people, I feel, endeared towards the founder because they find her to be inspirational, and they buy because of that reason. Sometimes also they buy because we promote our culture and our language. So many of our products, for example, we use are named after beauty icons in Africa. They are named after our own culture, our own language, and beauty concepts within Nigeria and Africa as a whole. So people buy products for some of those reasons. Yes, as the international brands come in also, they stand for something else. They stand for, we are a global brand, we're all over the world, and Africans still have that desire to feel, connected to an international brand. But I think that the indigenous brands will always have a place and satisfy the consumers in certain areas that international brands can never do.
All right, we're talking about going for your brands because the owner is inspirational, like you just mentioned earlier. Well, CSR on my side is a very strong word, but I have a feeling, the beauty industry seems to be moving from just, from going, setting up the businesses and, growing, beautifying other women in the country. You just recently launched an initiative. Can you just tell us more about that? And I see it's not really centered on just setting up a beauty industry. I guess there's much more to it. Can you just shed more light on what's
I think that it's the 100 Voices project, and the 100 Voices project is more or less like going to the human angle of the business, and going beyond the numbers, and going to the people who have been part of the growth. And what we wanted to do with their stories was to get their stories in and say, tell us how being a micro-entrepreneur today has changed your life. Tell us how you've applied what you've learned within our training, through our training. How has it impacted your life? Has it changed your life? And many of them would share the stories of how, for example, I was unemployed for so long after graduating. I couldn't do so and so. But today, I was able to grow a business today in the last 5 years of doing this business and then growing myself to become an independent entrepreneur, being an employer of labor today, employing 1 or 2 people. And we felt that their stories needed to be heard. And I felt that they were also underrepresented. So House of Tara put their stories together in a book. And that book is what we call House of Tara 100 Voices. It's just a story of inspiration and enterprise of young women and some men who've decided that in spite of the challenges in Nigeria, I'm still going to apply myself using something like beauty to build myself a business.
Oh, quite interesting. You mentioned that. So you talk about them giving you stories about what it takes to be a micro entrepreneur, and from the stories you've heard, Most people who want to start up businesses, what really comes to mind, or the first scare is capital. How much is going to cost me to start up? From what you've heard, how much do you think these people have managed over time to even start up their businesses?
Finance is definitely still a problem, and House of Tara has come up through the 100 Voices project. We've come up with an initiative to create a fund and to be able to give access to funding for young people who want to start up their businesses, and some of them who want to grow. But it's interesting that the amount of capital that is required for this business, it's very little. 15,000 or $100, a little. That's the lowest you can start up with. Getting the most minimal. But I feel that it wasn't enough for me to say, and as a business to say, oh, it's financing is always a problem for people. But what can we as a company do to help? And so we're not a finance company, but we decided, we'll create a fund and give it to a microfinance bank that has offices across the country. And for people who have the need, the bank will decide who has the need, and then provide them with the funding for them to be able to do so. As an entrepreneur, I know that it took me maybe about 8 to 9 years of being in business for me to get my first bank loan. And I know that that's a challenge for a lot of people. At the time, it was even a high amount of money. But I know that a 15,000 naira and a 10,000 naira can make a difference in someone's life. And what can House of Tara do as a company to make that available to someone who is genuinely interested